Chapter 16 of On Our Selection by Steele Rudd. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Son of the Exiles. Chapter 16. When Joe was in charge. Joe was a naturalist. He spent a lot of time that Dad considered should have been employed cutting burr or digging potatoes, in earmarking bears and bandicoots and catching goannas and letting them go without their tails or coupled in pairs with pieces of greenhide. The paddock was full of goannas in harness and slit-eared bears. They belonged to Joe. Joe also took an interest in snakes and used to poke among logs and brush fences in search of rare specimens. Whenever he secured a good one, he put it in a cage and left it there until it died or got out or Dad threw it, cage and all, right out of the parish. One day, while Mother and Sal were out with Dad, Joe came home with a 4-foot black snake in his hand. It was a beauty, so sleek and lithe and lively. He carried it by the tail, its head swinging close to his bare leg and the thing yearning for a grab at him, but Joe understood the ways of a reptile. There was no cage. Dad had burnt the last one, so Joe walked round the room wondering where to put his prize. The cat came out of the bedroom and meowed and followed him for the snake. He told her to go away. She didn't go. She reached for the snake with her paw. It bit her. She spat and sprang in the air and rushed outside with her back up. Joe giggled and wondered how long the cat would live. The Reverend Macpherson, on his way to christen Mackenzie's baby, called in for a drink and smilingly asked about Joe's health.
"Hold this cove, then,"
Joe said, handing the parson the reptile, which was wriggling and biting at space,
"and I'll get you one."
But when Mr. Macpherson saw the thing was alive, he jumped back and fell over the dog which was lying behind him in the shade. Bluey grabbed him by the leg, and the parson jumped up in haste and made for his horse, followed by Bluey. Joe cried,
"Come here,"
then turned inside. Mother and Sal entered. They'd come to make Dad and themselves a cup of tea. They quarrelled with Joe, and he went outside and started playing with the snake. He let it go and went to catch it by the tail again, but the snake caught him by the finger.
"He's bit me,"
Joe cried, turning pale. Mother screeched, and Sal bolted off for Dad, while the snake glided silently up the yard. Anderson, passing on his old bay mare, heard the noise and came in. He examined Joe's finger, bled the wound, and was bandaging the arm when Dad rushed in.
"Where is he?"
said.
"Oh, you damned whelp! You wretch of a boy! My God!" "Wasn't my fault."
And Joe began to blubber. But Anderson protested. There was no time, he said, to be lost barneying, and he told Dad to take his old mare Jean and go at once for Sweeney. Sweeney was the publican at Kangaroo Creek, with a reputation for curing snakebite. Dad ran out, mounted Jean, and turned her head for Sweeney's. But at the slip rails, Jean stuck him up and wouldn't go further. Dad hit her between the ears with his fist and got down and ran back.
"The boy'll be dead, Anderson,"
he cried, rushing inside again.
"Come on, then," Anderson said. "We'll take off his finger."
Joe was looking drowsy, but when Anderson took hold of him and placed the wounded finger on a block, and Dad faced him with the hammer and a blunt, rusty old chisel, he livened up.
"No, Dad, no,"
he squealed, straining and kicking like an old man kangaroo. Anderson stuck to him, though, and, with Sal's assistance, held his finger on the block till Dad carefully rested the chisel on it and brought the hammer down. It didn't sever the finger, it only scraped the nail off, but it did make Joe buck. He struggled desperately and got away. Anderson couldn't run at all. Dad was a little faster. Sal could run like a greyhound in her bare feet, but before she could pull her boots off, Joe had disappeared in the corn.
"Quick!"
Dad shouted, and the trio followed the patient. They hunted through the corn from end to end, but found no trace of him. Night came. The search continued. They called and called, but nothing answered save the ghostly echoes, the rustling of leaves, the slow, sonorous notes of a distant bear, or the neighing of a horse in the grass paddock. At midnight they gave up and went home and sat inside and listened and looked distracted. While they sat, Whisky, a blackfellow from Bilson's station, dropped in. He was taking a horse down to town for his boss and asked Dad if he could stay till morning. Dad said he could. He slept in Dave's bed. Dave slept on the sofa.
"If Joe ain't dead and was to come in before morning," Dave said, "there won't be room for us all."
And before morning Joe did come in. He entered stealthily by the back door and crawled quietly into bed. At daybreak Joe awoke and nudged his bedmate and said,
"Dave, the cocks has crowed."
No answer. He nudged him again.
"Dave, the hens is all off the roost."
Still no reply. Daylight streamed in through the cracks. Joe sat up, he was at the back, and stared about. He glanced at the face of his bedmate and chuckled and said,
"Who's been blackening you, Dave?"
He sat grinning a while, then stood up and started pulling on his trousers, which he drew from under his pillow. He had put one leg into them when his eyes rested on a pair of black feet uncovered at the foot of the bed. He stared at them and the black face again, then plunged for the door and fell. Whisky was awake and grinned over the side of the bed at him.
"What maketh you so frightened like that?"
he said, grinning more. Joe ran into Mother's room and dived in behind her and Dad. Dad swore and kicked Joe and jammed him against the slabs with his heels, saying,
"My God, you devil of a fellow, how dare you kick, run, kick, kick away yesterday, eh? Kick."
But he was very glad to see Joe all the same. We all felt that Shingle Hut would not have been the same place at all without Joe.